This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com. It's time for Booster Juice Vancouver Canadians Game Day.
I drive in a right field to the warning track, to the wall, it's gone!
Vancouver Canadians Game Day, your weekly wrap-up from around the major leagues. Now, here to knock it out of the park.
Deep to left, that one's not coming back!
Rob Fay.
Dude, are there steel drums in that intro? I feel like we need to play that again. Hold on. Let's turn this music down for a second. I'm Rob Fay. Welcome to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. I know what you're saying. Baseball? I'm going to change the channel, but hold on a second. Do we have that hockey available again? Let's do it again, but listen for the steel drums. Come on, one more time of flavor.
It's time for Booster Juice Vancouver Canadians.
By the way, I love this guy's voice. I'm going to talk right over this.
Field to the warning track.
Here we go.
It's gone!
So you got some cymbal?
Vancouver Canadians Game
But this is where it gets a little greasy right here. Ready for it?
Major leagues. Now, here to knock it out of the park.
There it is. There's a steel drum in there. Okay, good. I just wanted to verify that. Hard out, we call that, Reneel. Nicely done. Hope you didn't apply for a DJ job at Fortune Nightclub because you just got declined. I'm Rob Fay. By the way, outside of Skydome, which is now known as Rogers Center, they used to have a couple of guys that did the steel drums, and they were the real deal, man. They were fantastic. We are going to go high octane for the next couple of hours. We're going to talk all about baseball. We got to do it because it's Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice, but we will sprinkle in whatever you would like because I love the phone. 604-280-1040, 604-280-1040. I want to hear from you. Are you surprised that the Cubs got through? Are you surprised that the Red Sox fired manager John Farrell? What do you think of the 23 firings by the Toronto Blue Jays that includes their entire communications department minus Jay Stenhouse, and that's puberty, by the way. And then, of course, you get all of the other guys, like the strength coach and the trainer. I mean, this is a big overhaul. To me, that smells like a scapegoat, according to some. I don't know if I can disagree, but at the same time, I also understand that when you lose the man games that you did over the last season and a half, yeah, I think there is reason to assess those departments. More the training staff than the communication. I mean, communication guys are basically here's your stat pack. Let me make sure I can get that interview for you. Let's see what we can do. I mean, I don't understand why you would fire a communications department, but when new regimes come in, sometimes they want their guys, and I can totally understand that. We are a couple of minutes away. Actually, you know what? We should drum them up. By the way, Reneel, can I tell you something? You look like you got a shirt that's on from Star Trek.
It's a Nike skateboarding sweater here. I kind of like it.
Don't get me wrong. It's probably worth what, $1.20, $1.30?
$9.99.
Like $9.99.
Yeah. Winners. You can never go wrong.
Well, because all I can see from where I am right now is you've got the black collar, you've got the brownish shirt, and then there's a little patch right where that old Starship logo would be. So we need a Star Trek name for you by the end of this segment. Are you in?
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Nah, you're ready to punch me and walk out of here. Okay, so Easy Fear, our Jays insider, is just seconds away. We'll dial him up. We'll get him on the show. Later on tonight, KP Wee, who will join us, our statistical assassin. We will bring him in, and he's going to break everything down for the 4 teams that are still available. But again, the big story over the last day and a half is the Toronto Blue Jays, and I don't look at this as necessarily a cost-cutting measure. You cut into these departments, and you've obviously got a game plan that goes well beyond what you've acknowledged over the last couple of years. Of course, they've went in and they depleted some of their minor league system. They fired some guys, including Doug Davis, Rich Miller, Vancouver Canadians manager. And you know what? That's their decision. That's their prerogative. But I had a feeling, you think of all the injuries, everything back to, Blistergate when it came to Aaron Sanchez and just games lost. Jose Bautista, Russell Martin, Troy Tulowitzki. Some injuries are just dumb luck. I mean, there's not much you can do. It's just good old-fashioned dumb luck. But sometimes I think you can make a claim. And the Blue Jays make good on that claim as, again, they send 23 people home with a pink slip. We're joined by our baseball insider, Izzy Fear. Izzy, how are you, fella?
Rob, I'm good. Good to talk to you.
Yes, it's great to talk to you, man. Long time no talk. I have to ask you right out of the gate, the Toronto Blue Jays, of course, making some changes in some interesting departments, communications, and then their strength coach and their assistant trainer. A Are you a little surprised by those moves?
I think that over the course of this season, it did become a little obvious that Mark Shapiro and the new front office regime that came in toward the end of 2015 was looking to make some moves. Could I have seen this kind of sweeping change in the front office and with the training staff? No, not necessarily. It's a lot of people, a lot of departments affected, but ultimately, the fact that there was something done, I'm not super surprised, but I think that the overall number and all the departments affected did catch me off guard a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. I've been saying for weeks, and Matt said maybe even months, that I was talking about the assessment of the strength department and of course the training, because when you lose man games to the levels that the Blue Jays did, I thought it might be the Blue Jays and the Mets that would make this assessment, but the Blue Jays were first to that poll. Of course, John Gibbons is fine. According to Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, he's actually, quote, a part of the solution. But that was before John Farrell became available. There are a couple of different reports saying that maybe there's a 6 degrees of separation that might be visited. If I'm John Gibbons, am I a little nervous that the other John just became available?
As far as the manager's role is concerned, if I'm Gibbons, I'm not overly concerned that Farrell is now available. I know, and Mark Shapiro, Ross Atkins have been on the record repeatedly with how much they admire John Farrell. They've, of course, worked together in Cleveland for quite a while. I just don't think that the manager's role, given Farrell's history in Toronto in that role, is something that's there. I think that connection would involve Farrell being involved in some sort of consultant role, something to do with player development, a position that he's held before. But I do think that John Gibbons, if the team is playing or plays like they did this season early next year, that those whispers about his job will get louder. And if Farrell's still out there, I guess it's possible. But this one move here with the Red Sox firing Farrell wouldn't be the thing that sets me off if I'm Gibbons.
You know, Izzy, I've always said that waiting in the wings was Eric Wedge, but I've heard conflicting reports that maybe Wedge doesn't want to manage anymore at the major league level. Is there any smoke to that?
It sounds like that's really where Wedge is at right now, that he is enjoying what he's doing within the organization, working with minor leaguers, working with some prospects, having his hand in different teams and different parts of the front office. And that's a tough job, as you know, Rob. That being a big league manager is something that requires you to be on the road pretty much every day for 8 months. It's a job that he's done. Wedge has done in Cleveland and in Seattle, and then he's had some health concerns recently that I think have put the job that he wants to do in perspective a little bit. And as far as I know, the Blue Jays are very happy with what he's doing in his current role. And from that standpoint, I think that they'd like to keep him there, especially with the personal aspect there, with the health concerns, I think really first and foremost being the thing that they're valuing, and then that certainly Eric Wedge is valuing.
Izzy Fear joining us here on TSN 1040 for a couple of minutes. And Izzy, I really appreciate you doing it. You know, we've been very fortunate in Vancouver for the last 2 years to see two pretty good draft class come through. Of course, Nat Bailey Stadium. The Blue Jays have, in my estimation, especially this year, made some strides to bring the right guys. I mean, I remember TJ Zoik from a season ago. This year, we got to look at Nate Pearson and Logan Warmouth. I mean, I think that the cupboards are starting to get restocked. Is this maybe the silver lining to a rather dismal season in the fact that the Blue Jays will get a shot to pick a little bit higher and maybe even further replenish those cupboards?
I know that's what the front office is looking at, and they have said really since they came in. Mark Shapiro, Ross Atkins repeatedly talked about restocking that farm system, the importance of having a very strong farm system. They would point to the teams in the playoffs right now. You look at the Cubs, you look at the Astros. I don't think that they're wanting to have the kind of rebuild that those teams had, but they would certainly like to have the kind of farm system that those teams have had, where there's position player talent all over, that they're producing some good pitchers that can produce at the major league level. And we're seeing it so far with the farm system. This year was a very good year for the Jays system, and I know people here in Vancouver were really excited to see the first rounders in Pearson and Warmouth. They both played very well for the C's, and I think that's something that, as we saw at kind of the earlier days of the Canadiens' affiliation with the Blue Jays, where a bunch of major league talent was coming through on a yearly basis, that's something that the organization would love to have, not only just for the health of their farm system, but they do value that relationship with the Canadians and having their lower minor league players have that experience in a great ballpark is something that I know that they value and that they would like to have every single year if they could.
Izzy, I don't want to put you on the spot. When people ask me, what do you think of the starting lineup for the Toronto Blue Jays next season? I think I can go around the horn and take myself through the infield. Where I get a little hazy, and maybe you can help me out with this, is the outfield. I mean, obviously, we're going to get Kevin Pillar in center, but those corners are still question marks for me. I thought this year that maybe we would get a sniff of Román Fields after September. They ended up using that on Michael Saunders, and again, I understand it from an experience perspective, but I feel like the Blue Jays are off Dalton Pompey. They're still on Román Fields, who, of course, was the MVP of the Buffalo Bisons this year in limited action. What do you see the outfield looking like in 2018?
I think Fields is going to be one of those guys, obviously coming off of a really nice year in AAA, that heads into spring training and is in the mix. A couple of years ago, he really impressed at spring, but then didn't have quite the minor league season that I think he was anticipating to have, but bounced back this year. And there are some tools there that the team likes. He's very fast. He's got pretty good bat-to-ball skills. And they don't really have an answer on that roster. Teoscar Hernandez impressed in September, but he's still a bit of an unproven player, and they're not going to hand him the role. They're going to want some sort of competition. I do expect them to wade in the waters of free agency again, like they did last season, where they tried to get a Dexter Fowler or a Josh Reddick or an Andrew McCutchen. But if that's not possible, and given the money that's being thrown around for free agents these days, that's a very likely possibility that they don't come away with anybody. I do think that they'll look internally in a guy like Fields because of the skills that he has. Strong defense, good speed. That's something that's been lacking for this team. Even though they've had success in 2015 and in 2016, you could see it coming that the lineup was getting a little bit older. The defense was declining a little bit, and they're going to give a shot to the kind of players that can fill those gaps for them. And I do think that Fields is a super interesting candidate in the offseason and heading into spring training.
Does Josh Donaldson have an extension before we get to spring training?
I would be surprised. I know we'll get that arbitration number. Could they come to an agreement before that for a 1-year extension? I could see that, but I would be really surprised to see anything beyond 1 year for Donaldson this offseason.
And final question for you, Aaron Sanchez. I mean, 2 years ago, he's 15-2, and he was even getting a couple of Cy Young votes. Now, all of a sudden, you see Blistergate for the better part of the season, just couldn't seem to find his stride. How important is a bounce-back season, and would a bounce-back season spell the end of his time with the Blue Jays? Because, of course, with his agent and the number that they're projecting, Blue Jays might not want to go in on a guy like that.
It's an interesting layer to where Sanchez is at, that's for sure. Anytime you bring in Scott Boras by your side, there are going to be those questions. And it was quiet, obviously, this year because he was limited to 36 innings and he dealt with the blister, and that was the prevailing story. I think that they'll absolutely take another kind of season like he had in 16, and if Marcus Stroman can replicate the success that he had this year, you feel pretty good about the top of your rotation. And the Blue Jays keep saying they're intent on at least pushing for a wild card spot next year, and that's not going to happen if Aaron Sanchez doesn't have a big kind of year. And from there, they'll have the big decision to make on Donaldson, and some of the other big decisions they're going to have to make is going to be Sanchez, is going to be Roberto Osuna. What do you do with a young closer that's had a ton of success as well? They're in a very interesting spot, and the success they've had the last couple of years has led to some of these problems, I guess you could say. But if they can compete next year, they'll take them. And as Mark Shapiro likes to say, there's a reason that he's in this job, in that kind of capacity. He knows that it's a tough decision. There are tough decisions to make, and that's why they bring the big boys in there to make them.
Izzy, great stuff, man. I knew I could count on you for a good interview and good insight. So thanks for making time for me, and you can stop by anytime your heart desires.
You got it, Rob. Congrats on the new show, all right?
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. There he is, Izzy Fier, our baseball insider right here on TSN Radio. And I'll tell you what, man, I've known Izzy since he was a young fella, and he is absolutely fantastic at his job. We're going to go to our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 teams that remain, the American League Championship Series and National League Championship Series. We will also talk a little bit more about that very last bit that we got from Izzy with regards to where do the Blue Jays go with a couple of the big names that are pending? Josh Donaldson's one. Marcus Stroman is coming up. You've also got Roberto Osuna coming up along with Aaron Sanchez. So the nucleus of the new generation is all coming front and center. And I love that most of them have come through Toronto or, of course, Vancouver en route to Toronto. I mean, we have an intimate relationship with Stroman and Sanchez and Osuna. But now those 3 guys that are bona fide major league players are looking to either become Blue Jays long-term or shop their services elsewhere. If we were to get you to put them in order, we'll do that on the other side of the break. You're listening to live coverage of Vancouver Canadians Game Day. It's always powered by Booster Juice, and it's right here on TSN 1040.
You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice.
High drive. Deep to left. That one's not coming back. Oh, payback.
Here's your host, Rob Fay.
Dude, every inning I watch this game between the Yankees and the Astros, it's a little more egg on my face. The yolk is dripping. It's just not a good situation. I said before the playoffs started that the Houston Astros were the Trojan horse. Big on the outside, a lot of regular season wins, but they weren't going to be a team that could get it done in the postseason. Not only did they discard the Boston Red Sox, but right now Dallas Keuchel in the orange, blue, and white number 60 jersey with that beard that would make Benjamin Franklin a little off record. Or most Mennonites. I would say right now, Dallas Keuchel's pitching the game of the season. He just offered up his 100th pitch. Houston leads 2-0 over the Yankees in the top of the 7th, and New York hasn't gotten anything off of the left-hander right now. That bullpen for Houston is decent. It's not quite as good as the Yankees, but the Yankees have nothing to speak of. Keuchel has scattered 4 hits, no runs. He's walked 1 and he struck out a handful. But I'll tell you what, man. Houston Astros making me eat my lunch on a regular basis this postseason and very deserving. And it looks like they're almost on their way to the bottom of the 7th as well. Chicago Cubs, I called Chicago to get past the Nationals. So don't worry, I'm not smoking a cigar, eating some emoji smoked salmon. But I did think that the Nationals, as good as they were in tough. That's a pretty tough first round opponent. When you get the Cubs, the defending World Series champs that have been there before. That was a crazy Game 5, a 9-8 final where the Cubs were able to win that one after being down early. We talk about baseball executives. And by this, I mean, we're talking about the Billy Beans of the world. We're talking about the Mark Shapiros of the world. Theo Epstein has got to be on a different level altogether. I think Theo Epstein's on the verge of Cooperstown. I mean, realistically, if you think of what Theo's done, and he's not the oldest guy in the world, Theo has taken the two of the most historically snake-bitten franchises in the history of baseball and gotten them to both win World Series. I mean, Theo Epstein, for the rest of his life, punches his own ticket, does whatever he wants. He's 44 years old, so he's got he's 43. I just think right now, when I look at Theo Epstein, if you were to look at his LinkedIn profile, 3-time World Series champion, 04, 07, 16. Of course, he was the architect. He didn't play. And it wasn't just 2 teams. It was the Red Sox and then, of course, the Chicago Cubs. Last year, he's named the Sporting News Executive of the Year. I mean, he's just got a laundry list of stuff that's going. And the thing that I like about Theo is the way that he builds teams. I mean, I just sit there and I think to myself, there are so many moves that you make, but sometimes it's the moves that you don't make. And Theo is a big believer, not just in the sabermetrics and all of the analytics that go into baseball, but he is also a feel guy. He's an understanding, for a guy that's young, he's actually got a bit of an old soul, according to some, based on the fact that he understands how important the clubhouse is and how important life for a player is. And I'm not getting all touchy-feely like Joe Madden does. but it is a little more endearing when he understands that in the 21st century, and of course with players in 2017, you can't use the brash old style, the hard-ass style, the way that it's like, well, you should be lucky to be a major leaguer. Every individual player in the major leagues is almost like their own little corporation now. Gone are the days where players all go out together and eat. You'll see pockets of players that'll hang out together, but even when you come back to Toronto, you look at certain players. For example, Jose Bautista, former Toronto Blue Jay as of this conversation. He was his own guy. He was in it for Jose Bautista. Now, don't get me wrong. He bled Toronto Blue Jays blue, but Jose did Jose. Marcus Stroman looks to be following that same. And there's another guy that I think has really put a little bit of egg on my face this year. I remember when Stroman was pitching for Team USA at the World Baseball Classic. Of course, he was named the MVP of that tournament. But I thought to myself for sure that a guy that's 5'9", and I get it, the height doesn't measure heart and all the stuff that comes with that. But I didn't know if Marcus Stroman had enough tread on the tire to get through pitching that hard that early in the season and still log a respectable 200 innings for the Toronto Blue Jays this season. But when we look at Marcus Stroman's stats at the end of 2017, sure enough, 13-9, and he pitches 201 innings. He had just as many strikeouts as he did back in 2016. He had a few more walks. I mean, realistically, 8 more than he had a year prior. But again, Stroman did exactly what Stroman needed to do. 13-9 this season. Do you call him the ace? Do you call him the ace of the Toronto Blue Jays this year? You could. And I don't think people will look at you with raised eyebrows and say that you're nuts. I mean, because it was Blistergate for Aaron Sanchez. J.A. Happ fell like a rock from the sky compared to what he had numerically a year before. Estrada, a little inconsistent. And, of course, not even going to mention Joe Biagini and the other guys that got spot starts for the Toronto Blue Jays over the course of the summer. So, yeah, I guess you would say that Marcus Stroman is essentially your ace. Marcus Stroman is going to be a very interesting guy when he finally comes up for the arbitration. He signed through 2017. The earliest that he can get his arbitration is this coming season, and the earliest that he can be a bona fide free agent is 2021. Now, this year, he's not like Aaron Sanchez, who was still, pennies on the dollar, or certain players like Roberto Osuna, pennies on the dollar. Stroman got to $3.4 million this season, and he's got a couple of years service time, and I think that Stroman, I don't think he'll ever be a bona fide number one. I think he's number one on a Blue Jays team right now that had a couple of guys with down seasons. And I'm not trying to hate on Marcus Stroman, but I don't know. I just don't vision him as an ace of a staff. I don't look at him like I would look at a Max Scherzer. I don't look at him like I would look at a Steven Strasburg or a Justin Verlander. And I know he's young. I mean, he's 26, but I don't know. And shame on me, because I know that there's guys out there that had great careers that were, lesser in stature as far as the height goes. I know. All you got to do is look to a guy that used to pitch for the New York Yankees. Ron Guidry, 5'11", a guy that, again, was below the cusp of 6 feet. And Ron Guidry went on to have a great career. 170 wins against just 91 losses. He played for 14 seasons, all with the Yankees, including a season where he rattled off a 25-3 campaign. That was back in 1978. But when I look at Marcus Stroman, I don't know why I keep seeing, and again, this has nothing to do with stature and race, but I keep seeing a guy that I think one day is going to find his way into the bullpen. And yet I can't, because I have nothing to support that when I look at the innings over the last couple of years. I mean, he is a starter. He is a hell of a starter. I don't know why I can't get over the fact that I don't get down with Marcus Stroman. He's done everything possible to warrant not only being a starter, but being an ace. I've seen a lot of baseball in my 11 years of the Vancouver Canadians, and of course I've been a Major League Baseball fan my whole life, and yet for some reason I just can't put it together that Marcus Stroman is the ace of a team in the American League East. But his analytics are good. His strikeouts are there. He's almost a strikeout per inning guy. He had a very respectable ERA as well this year at 3.09. I mean, Marcus Stroman is a stud, but I don't know if I see Marcus Stroman as a guy that's going to make $15 or $20 million a year. I don't know if I could invest on that. You know what it is? I'll call it what it is. I keep waiting for Marcus Stroman to break. I mean, I see all of these big horses that are out there, like, all of the Steven Strasburg broke. Noah Syndergaard broke. I mean, surely these guys with those big, long frames and the reach of an albatross, those guys are built to last, and yet they've all broken. And this small, compact, amazingly muscular Marcus Stroman just continues to wine and dine like he's been there before. He walks with a strut that you just don't see from most guys that are 5'8", 180 pounds, that throw mid-90s and register 200 innings a year. He is such an interesting specimen in the fact that he is a starter that is proving all of his naysayers, myself included, wrong. Now, it leads me to this. Roberto Osuna, a little bit taller, 6'2", 215, but he is a closer. And boy, has he been a good closer. He hasn't been perfect. He's blown a couple of saves over the last couple of seasons. But at 22 years old, this is going to blow your mind. At 22 years old, Roberto Osuna has 95 saves. 95 saves at 22 years old. I'm going to give you a little perspective here. Who do you think's one of the best closers of all time? Mariano, right? Mariano Rivera, the New York Yankee legend who did a lot of his successful things in the postseason, but he was a 13-time All-Star, a World Series MVP, an All-Star Game MVP. He won 5 World Series. He was the American League Championship MVP, and he won 5 Rule 8 reliefs. Again, a laundry list of accolades for Mariano Rivera. You know how many saves he had at 22? 0. Do you know how many saves Mariano Rivera had at 25 years old? 0. This is the greatest closer in Major League Baseball history, or he's right up there with the best of them. And he's got 95 saves, does Roberto Osuna, to Mariano Rivera's 0. Who else? Dennis Eckersley, for example. How many saves do you think Dennis Eckersley had when he was 22 years old? I can tell you, 3. You know how many saves Dennis Eckersley had when he was 29 years old? 3. Reason I'm telling you this is I think this is a very big concern for the Toronto Blue Jays. It might not be now because they've got Roberto Osuna under control for a little bit longer, but I just don't know how you can not assume that Roberto Osuna, his upside is meteoric. And people keep saying, well, maybe we should make him a starter. Maybe we should make him a... You get a good closer in your franchise and you don't let that guy go. You know how much Roberto Osuna made this year? $500,000. You know how much he made the year before? $500,000. They have gotten, the Toronto Blue Jays, 95 saves from a guy that in all of those 3 years made $1 million. It's one of the best deals in all of Major League Baseball. I swear to you. He signed through 2017. He's eligible for arbitration in 2018. And it's exactly the same as Marcus Stroman. He's a free agent in 2021. Again, 95 saves for $1 million. But I just sit here and I think to myself, if I was Roberto Osuna and I'm getting this kind of mileage on that kind of a contract, when my number comes up, I better be getting paid. And, I will tell you this. Arbitration for Roberto Osuna is going to be very interesting. I mean, Marcus Stroman is judged to a different merit. He's judged on innings. He's judged on his ERA, starts, durability. And I think that if, Marcus Stroman went to arbitration, he'd be just fine. Because he's hit all of the numbers that you want. Is he a 20-game winner? No. But was he the best pitcher on his staff rotation-wise this year? You could make a case and probably say yes. But Roberto Osuna this year in 2017 had 39 saves at 22 years old. I can assure you this. He's going to get paid moving forward. And if the Blue Jays don't want to pay him, I guarantee you there's going to be probably about 15 to 20 teams that would say, we'll pay him. If he can stay healthy and he can stay in shape and he can continue to put up 35 to 40 saves, that is a major asset to a bunch of organizations in baseball. I don't think you put Roberto Osuna on the Aroldis Chapman. I don't think you put him on the Andrew Miller. I don't think you put him in that top 5, top 7 yet. But again, you talk about a guy like Andrew Miller right now, one of the best, I think we could agree, one of the best pitchers in baseball for the back end of the bullpen. He's 32 years old. You look at Aroldis Chapman, and you think to yourself, well, what's he worth? I mean, right now, he's worth his weight in gold, but Aroldis Chapman is 29 years old. 39 saves, and he's 22 years old. The Toronto Blue Jays have an absolute gold mine sitting at the back end of their bullpen, and I know he went through some ups and downs this year from a mental health perspective and a couple of blown saves along the way. But again, if you got 95 saves for $1 million and you've got a closer that's daggone good and he's 22, bruh, as the great KGB said in the movie Rounders, pay that man his money. 7:44 in Vancouver. We take a break. When we come back, we're going to shift gears. We're going to leave the nest of the Toronto Blue Jays, and we're going to go to the deep seas where we will bring our trident and talk Mariners. You're listening to live coverage of Vancouver Canadians Game Day. You do it on TSN. Major League Baseball, Houston leading the New York Yankees 2-0. That one now on the top of the 8th from Houston. Boy, Astros looking real good. Yankees getting a taste of the good life right now. But again, Yankees were down 2-0 in their first series against Cleveland. Everybody wrote them off. They came back with 3 straight wins, and that is why they are playing Houston tonight. But Dallas Keuchel, extraordinary. Dallas Keuchel's an interesting guy because I still don't think he gets the grease, and maybe that's part of the reason that he plays in Houston, a secondary-sized market. I don't know how many people in Vancouver really follow the Houston Astros, but I can tell you, if you've been watching the postseason, you're getting a good look at a very, very impressive young man. After one season, the new owner of the Seattle Mariners said that he liked the direction where they were going this year, but was hoping for a little more magic. And I think that's pretty fair to say. The ownership and then John Stanton all came in and weighed in on the 2017 season the other day. Actually, it was earlier, it was midday yesterday. And they talked about everything from Scott Service, the manager, to Robinson Cano and Seager and Felix and the whole shebang. And it was kind of a revealing, you look at the Blue Jays, for example, it feels very corporate. It feels very big league. Everything is methodical. Everything's thought out. The personality, we're still trying to figure it out. I liked what we got from the Seattle Mariners at their State of the Union yesterday. Mariners CEO John Stanton said he needs his team to back up the actions and back up the words. And he was pretty humble, but he said, quote, it's hard because I'm one of them. I think it's incumbent on us to demonstrate to our fans our commitment to doing things that is necessary to win. My words, I can say that we're deeply committed to winning the World Series, which we are. We are deeply committed to making the playoffs next year. And at some point in time, my words become hollow. We have to back those words up with action, both in terms of the decisions that Jerry DiPoto makes and the decisions that manager Scott Service makes. But ultimately, it has to be backed up with results, unquote. Mariners were right there for a while. And I said this a couple of weeks back on this very show that I was mesmerized by the lack of passion from a Mariners fan base. And I can understand why. You know how many years it's been since the Mariners made the playoffs? 16. 16 years. The last time was that awesome run back in 2001. But right now, if you're a 19-year-old kid listening to this radio station, you have no recollection of the Seattle Mariners ever playing playoff baseball. You were 3 the last time that Ken Griffey and co. made their way. That's a challenge on several fronts. That's a challenge on several fronts because the reality is you've got this team that's 3 hours away that you believe have something there and just can't seem to find their way through. I mean, you've got, the last time they were there, listen to the lineup. Dan Wilson was a catcher, Olerud at first, Brett Boone at second, Mike Cameron in center. I think I said Ken Griffey. I stand corrected. But you had Jay Buhner, Ed Sprague, Tom Lampkin, and Pat Borders. Not a team that you would write home about. And 38-year-old Jamie Moyer. Little did we know that he would play for almost a decade longer. That was a team that won 116 games. And that is what Mariners fans cling to. They're like, well, I mean, yeah, that's the good old days. Since then, nothing. So the Mariners right now are in transition, and they've got a good team. I mean, it wasn't a team that was 500. It wasn't a team that made the playoffs, even though they were down into the final week and a half of the season. But you start looking at Felix Hernandez, who's starting to get a little bit older by, year terms. He's going to be 30 next year. Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid that Felix Hernandez actually reaches his 30s. When Felix broke into the league, he was 19 years old. I stand corrected. I did the math wrong. I thought he was 29. He was 31. I flunked out. But nonetheless, Felix Hernandez already with 13 years of Major League Baseball service. Felix has pitched over 2,500 Major League innings. Just for perspective, 8 straight seasons of more than 200 innings on the mound. The tread on that tire, I don't care what anybody says, is suspect now that he's into his 30s. He goes down into the Mariners Hall of Fame. I got to think that they might even consider retiring his number when everything's said and done. Felix has been everything you could have ever asked for. Do you know what Felix has never done, though? He's never been a 20-game winner. I find that extraordinary when we think of all of the accolades, the fact that he's won a Cy Young, the fact that he's been a 6-time All-Star, the fact that he has been the bona fide ace of the staff for 7 or 8 years, and he's never won 20. He's won 19, he's won 18, but he's never gotten over the proverbial hump. He's won 160 Major League games in a 13-year career. There we go. I'm not going to throw too many stats at you, but this is where you got to start saying, okay, if we're the Seattle Mariners, what are we? I mean, yeah, they got James Paxton, a Canadian kid, a BC boy, and that's, pretty good. He's taking the next step. He's going to be a somebody. But all of the other key players are starting to get a little longer in the tooth. I mean, Robinson Cano is starting to get older. Nelson Cruz, he's starting to get older as well. So who is the next generation? And I don't think there's many of us in the city who could answer that. I mean, Robinson Cano is 34 years old. There's not much, again, not to use the adage too much, but there's not too much tread left on that tire. Nelson Cruz is 36 years old. And even though Cruz had a 39 home run season with 119 RBIs, which is plenty good to be an all-star, and you might even get a little bit of a MVP consideration, I don't think he'll get many votes. This is a team that needs to bring the youth forward, and the youth that they have right now is not good enough. So they can talk all they want, speaking to the Seattle Mariners, about, walking the walk and talking the talk. But if you can't field a team that's got any sense of depth and youth and the future's coming, I think they're going to get worse before they get better. I mean, Kyle Seager at third, Segura at short, Cano at second, and Alonso over at first base, and Mike Zunino is the catcher. Zunino, of course, we saw him a couple of years when he was with the Everett Aqua Sox. 26 years old, a guy that I always thought was going to turn into a somebody. This year had a pretty good year from a number-wise. He had 25 home runs, but only 64 RBI. And he struck out 160 times. I've got a feeling that they're going to either have to open up the old coffers and go out and get them some pretty big talented free agents like they did when they got Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz. But I don't know how much longer you can play that kind of a game. The Yankees tried it, didn't work. Red Sox tried it, didn't work. And I don't know if the Mariners try it, that it's going to work. And I also thought, and very quickly before we go to the break, we'll do the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to stick to it. But is Seattle still an attractive market for a free agent? I mean, you're in no man's land. Beautiful stadium, beautiful part of the world, but you're not really connected to anybody. Geographically, the closest, the Angels got to be geographically the closest team in the American League that you say is a rival. It just feels like the Siberia of Major League Baseball. And yet they've got this gorgeous stadium, gorgeous city, new ownership, deep pockets. It's all there. But I don't know if I'm a free agent and I'm looking what's coming up and what's about to retire, if that's a place where I'd want to set up shop. Which is sad to say because, again, I love the Mariners and I love their stadium. All right, we're going to go into the 8 o'clock hour. On the other side of the break, we will talk a little more baseball. Talk about the postseason with KP Wee as you're listening to live coverage of Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice on TSN Radio.
It's time to talk all things C's.
Oh, man, this guy's like a 10-month pregnant woman. So overdue for the big fly here. You know it's coming sooner or later.
To learn what goes on behind the scenes.
Breaking news, the foot-long corn dog is back at Nat Bailey Stadium.
Find out what's happening in baseball.
That guy over there is actually a bona fide skeleton. Get him out of here. He's going to scare the kids.
And get taught valuable life lessons.
Nothing's better than being on the VIP list at the Roxy, where they still put you in line for half an hour. Hey, buddy, I'm on the VIP. Ready to go. Yeah, okay, over there to the left. No, I'm on the VIP. Yeah, I know. Over to the left.
Only one man can fit the bill.
Hey!
Vin Scully's heir apparent.
Oh, man, get that guy a big old bottle of a cheese ball and let him spray it all over his chest.
Fresh off a 2-foot hot dog.
Just trying to jam that hot dog in me as fast as I could.
Here he is.
Oh, my God, Josh! No! For the love of mankind!
Rob Fay!
4 minutes after 8, I'm Rob Fay, and welcome back to TSN Radio right here on TSN1040. And yes, man, I'll tell you what, Yankees ran into a Mack truck tonight as the Houston Astros pitching staff looks extraordinarily good tonight, and their fan base going nuts. There's about 50,000 people down at Minute Maid Park that are all waving their orange towels and now find themselves 3 outs away from an opening Game 1 victory over the New York Yankees. You know, journalists are good and hard to find in this day and age. There's a lot of guys on social media that kind of muddy the waters, but a guy that's written a couple of baseball novels, he's got one coming out in just a couple more months, joins us now. Baseball insider KP Wee. KP, how are you tonight?
Doing well, Rob. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Well, no problem. Let's start with the 4 teams that remain right now. Yankees and Astros, this one getting late. I always thought that the Astros would implode, and yet for some reason they've gotten better as this postseason goes on. Was I wrong in underestimating Houston?
Well, I guess when you talk about the division that the Astros play in the American League West, playing the Angels, playing the Mariners, playing the A's, I guess that is not a strong division. But, I think they're motivated because of, I don't want to use this as I guess, a rallying point, but what happened to them with Hurricane Harvey, I think baseball fans across America are probably rooting for the Astros, I would guess. But they, the name of the game is pitching, hitting. They've been doing these things. They've gotten great pitching. Or they did in the Boston series, which wasn't a surprise to me because they added Verlander down the stretch, and Verlander, is a stud. Being able to beat the Red Sox, that did not surprise me at all. But we'll see what happens in this series against the Yankees.
Yeah, we'll get to the Red Sox in a second because I know that you have a real affection for Doug Fister. But before we get there, I am mystified by the fact that Aaron Judge has completely fallen off the radar in the postseason. I mean, he could do no wrong in the regular season, but the Yankees are lucky to be where they are because the production for Aaron Judge just has not been there. It kind of reminds me of a batting practice all-star, a guy that can hit the ball 500 feet when nobody's watching. Then you turn the red-hot lights on and he falls away. What do you think is happening here with Aaron Judge?
I think guys have been figuring out how to pitch to him. He had a monster first half of the season. Second half didn't go as well. I mean, he still managed to set the AL rookie record for home runs in the season, but
again, when you get to the playoffs, it's like the best teams remaining. You're facing the best pitching. Hey, like these guys that are left, the teams that are left, they have figured out a way to pitch to them so far, and it's not surprising considering over the history of baseball playoffs, you got big guns that struggle in the postseason, whether it's because of being nervous, whether it's because of too much pressure being placed on them, whatever. Barry Bonds didn't do well in the first few times they made the playoffs. And the Pirates suffered because of that, and we're seeing that with Aaron Judge. It doesn't surprise me just because it's happened throughout the game, throughout the history of the game. You have sluggers that just can't deliver or can't seem to deliver in the playoffs, and on the other hand, you got guys like, let's say, Carlos Beltran, for example, who just always seems to hit in playoffs no matter what. So. Just one of those things that you come to expect come playoff time.
I didn't pick everybody right, but I did get the Cubs right by getting past the Nationals. I just thought that there was still that youthful naivete when it came to the Cubs, with the fact that, they shouldn't have beaten the Nationals. They shouldn't have beaten a team that went on and rattled off 100 wins. But, experience is so key. And even though they're young, Chris Bryant, Alberto Mora, Baez, this is a team that's been the World Series champion before. They know what it's like. And I just felt like that was the perfect storm, that the Nationals were a team that was led by Dusty Baker that just couldn't get over the hump, and then faced a team that in the defending champs that just didn't care, and it showed in a 5-game series.
And this is something that other baseball observers have noted, and it's a knock on Dusty Baker for sure, that it seems that, again, according to the experts, that he manages the game in October just the same way that he would manage a game against the Padres in June, in a mid-season series. There doesn't seem to be any kind of sense of urgency until Game 5 when he threw in Max Scherzer in there, who didn't deliver. But I guess Baker has had some bad luck in the playoffs. Like, for that series, it didn't surprise me. The only series that surprised me was the Dodgers Diamondback series. But with the Cubs, even before 2016, they made the playoffs the year before that, and I believe they lost to the Dodgers, if I'm not mistaken, but this is like the third consecutive year in the playoffs. So, they've been through it all. Obviously, they have to have good pitching, they have to hit, but the experience, I think, goes a long way. For some reason, Washington it can't seem to advance past the first round. This is like the fourth time since moving to DC in 2005, where they were the favorite going into the division series, and every single time they've lost in that first round, despite being favorites in all of those series.
What happened to Boston?
Chris Sale didn't pitch well in Game 1 for one thing, and apparently John Farrell left Sale in too long in the fourth game, where he gave out the go-ahead or the tying run in the 8th inning, and Kimbrough came in and blew it, or gave up the go-ahead hit. It's just that if you don't pitch well, you're not going to win. You're not going to get far. And unfortunately, Sale didn't do the job in the first game. He did well in coming in relief in the fourth game, Game 4, but Verlander, which was better. And they couldn't stop Altuve. It's like you got to pitch, you got to catch, you got to hit, and they just couldn't do it in the 4 games against Houston.
KP Wee joining us here for just a couple more seconds. KP, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the Toronto Blue Jays. We talk about man games lost, and it was something that I said right on the outset of the show, that you have to, at times, it's more than the manager or the general manager. Sometimes it is the medical and the training department when you lose these man games. The Blue Jays, I guess they agreed in the fact that they let go their assistant trainer and their strength coach. In an analytical world, when it comes to baseball, do you think that this is the right move, or do you think they were made to maybe be the scapegoats of this all?
Me, personally, I don't think this is the right move, but, with the way baseball has changed, they've got guys, pitchers, being monitored for, pitch count. They're being, I don't want to use the word baby, but essentially that's what's been happening in the game, and training and conditioning is a big part of it, because you're talking about investing millions of dollars into these young arms and you want them to be able to be healthy throughout the course of a 162-game season. The New York Mets, for example, was a lost season for the Mets because of injuries, like Noah Syndergaard, their entire pitching staff had problems. So it's not just a Blue Jays thing, but teams that have injury problems, you're going to see their medical staff, the training staff get blamed just because, hey, nowadays it's about controlling the workload of your pitchers, making sure that your regular guys are able to play, and nowadays with Twitter, with social media, anybody can just let's just say it's easier to point fingers these days. And me personally, I don't agree with it, but that's what the game that's how the game has changed since the last 20 years.
KP, before I let you go, I know you got a new writing project that is getting closer to completion. The story of the 1988 Los Angeles Dodgers, and you've been able to interview almost the entire team from 1988. How did that come about, and how close are you to getting it released?
Oh, thanks, Rob, for the question. It's a book that the idea started in December last year. Fred Clare, the former general manager of the Dodgers, emailed me to wish me a happy holidays and asked me what I was up to. The reason he and I have been communicating was because back in 2010, I reached out to him to interview him for a book I was writing about Tom Candiotti for the biography for the knuckleball pitcher. And Fred Clare has stayed in contact, and he threw out the idea that, hey, it's 2018 is the 30th anniversary of the last LA Dodgers World Championship. Why don't you write a book about it? I could help you get contact information of all these guys that were on the team. So we talked a little bit about it, and I thought, great idea. And talked to guys like Tim Leary, Mickey Hatcher, Steve Sachs, even like backup players. They call them the stuntmen or the stunt guys back in those days. Rick Dempsey, and even some of the guys on the coaching staff and some of the scouts as well. Talked to Mal Dedier before he unfortunately passed away in September. And it's fun. It's a fun project, and I have a publisher. The manuscript is due November 1st, so I do have a couple weeks before it has to be submitted. It's nearing completion. I just need to get a few more things done and be ready to send it off. And the book will be coming out in August of 2018, just in time for the stretch drive for next year.
I love it. And you're going to do it on the 30th anniversary, which was equally as cool. KP, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate your insight tonight.
Thanks, Rob, and pleasure as always. Hope to talk to you again soon.
We'll do it soon. There he is, KP Wee, joining us right here on TSN Radio. Boy, that's cool, man. 1988. I would always say if he could find his way to getting Vin Scully, that'd be kind of cool. Maybe I'll be like KP Wee for Vin Scully, and then Vin answers the phone. He's like, "Hello," and I'm just like, "Oh my God!" And I hang up. I get all nervous. 8:16 in Vancouver. We're working our way towards the 9 o'clock hour. We'll get you back to the regularly scheduled programming. Do not forget Rob Fay Nation Radio. He's back on the air tonight at 10. We will talk about all of the news and sports of the day, not just baseball, but everything under the sun. And we look forward to having you along for that ride as well. We'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk once again about Major League Baseball's postseason, but we're going to get into the Canadian content. If you were to be given 5 plaques, 5 empty blank wooden plaques that you could put your 5 best in Canadian history, where would you go? I know 2 of them already. We're going to talk Ferguson Jenkins, Larry Walker. Those are the no-brainers. Joey Votto, would he make your list? I mean, there's so many different ways we could go. The 2 or the 3 are easy, but then you get competitive with the other ones. So we'll get into that next right here on TSN 1040.
You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice.
High drive. Deep to left. That one's back on the net. Hey, see that.
Here's your host, Rob Fay.
Friday night in Vancouver. I'm Rob Fay. Welcome back to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered as always by Booster Juice. Do not forget, at the end of this show, we have Giants this week, and then we go a little different as we go into Rob Fay Nation Radio that will take us right up to midnight. So again, a lot of local coverage here on TSN Radio, and we are so glad that you've stopped by to check in on the World of Sport. As Renil mentioned, just a couple of outs away, we will keep you abreast of that situation between Houston and the Yankees, where Houston right now leading by a score of 2-0. As good as the Astros have played, Yankees are still within striking distance right now, but they are in tough in the top of the ninth in a very hostile environment. Houston has really turned up for this game, turned up for this series, turned up for this postseason. You know, we talked just before we went to the break about greatest Canadian baseball players, and I know what you're thinking. Boy, you're starting to stretch thin on this show, but it was brought to my attention the other day. Somebody said, you know, Joey Votto is overrated. And I said, dude, Joey Votto is anything but overrated. If anything, he's underappreciated. So we got into a bit of a conversation because you always know the Larry Walkers of the world, the Fergie Jenkins of the world, they're always going to get their praise. Justin Morneau could probably be put on that list. And then Joey Votto, I think, would make my Mount Rushmore of great Canadian players. But if you were to find a fifth, that's where things get a little bit creative. You could go far back. You can go to names like Jason Bay, Ryan Dempster, Terry Poole. I mean, you know what? Gone are the days, Corey Koski. Gone are the days where you sit there and you say, boy, there's only been a few of them. Now you've really got to scour. And what's enjoyable is when you see the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame and they start to acknowledge generation of baseball player that I'm in. I'm in my 40s now. And so you start to see names that you're pretty familiar with. Another name that was brought forward was Denny Boucher, which at first I didn't really think much of, but Denny Boucher's had a pretty nice career. I mean, yeah, wins and losses, not a lot there. It is 4 years between Toronto, Cleveland, and Montreal, but a guy that at least made a statement. And a guy that was, you know, pitching in the major leagues when being a Canadian and being an Anglo-Canadian wasn't the easiest thing to do. I just think baseball now, when you see a Canadian in the major leagues, you just assume, yeah, he's Canadian. But back in the days, it wasn't that way. And you look to the last generation that has come through before the Adam Lowens of the world, before we got to, you know, the consistency. I think you could put Eric Gagne in that conversation of great Canadians to have pitched at the major league level. I mean, Eric Gagne had a 10-year career, had a 55 save season for the Dodgers back in 2003. 55 saves for anybody is a monstrous season. And sometimes I don't think Eric Gagne gets his love. He used to get ripped unabashedly by Jim Rome. Rome never let up on Eric Gagne. But Eric Gagne, when you pull back, had a pretty good career. 187 saves, 10-year major league career, 8 of those with the Dodgers before he spun his tires with Texas, Milwaukee, and Boston. I think you could make a case for Ryan Dempster if you wanted to go that way. Now, Dempster didn't have anything dramatic in the wins and losses category. He finished his career 132 and 133. But you also throw in the fact that he had 87 saves and pitched nearly 2,500 innings over a 16-year major league career. And, you know, he could have made it 17. And this is the thing that I like. This, to me, screams Canada. Ryan Dempster, right at the end of his contract, right at the end of his playing days when he was with Boston, had the opportunity to make a fair amount more. If memory serves me correct, that was a $25 or $26 million deal. So he got his 2013 World Series championship, and with the Red Sox made just over $13 million. He had another year on his contract where he could have milked the Red Sox, who were ready to move on for him. And now all of a sudden you sit there and you say to yourself, boy, he gave it back. Isn't that something? But it was just the eloquence of it. The fact that, you know what, he understood that if he wasn't going to play, he shouldn't get paid. And by the way, the Yankees just got a solo home run. It's now a 2-1 game with 2 outs in the top of the ninth. So the Yankees are fighting the good fight. Just when you thought that it was over, all of a sudden the Yankees, well, they're getting theirs as well. I don't know. When I think of good baseball players, and by the way, you're wondering who the home run was, it was Greg Bird. His first of the postseason on a deep fly to right. Does that put him in a different perspective? I mean, Ryan Dempster as a man is not perfect, flawed, as we all are. But when you make that kind of a gesture to an organization like the Boston Red Sox, like, hey, I'm not going to take this money. Use it and go and get somebody and go and get yourself another championship. That, to me, screams integrity. And, Ryan Dempster, one of the good guys in the game, he works with the Chicago Cubs organization, so obviously now has 2 World Series rings. One with the Cubs as a executive, one with the Red Sox as a player. I think that puts him in the Mount Rushmore. Because there might be guys who had better tenures, like Eric Gagne, as far as more saves than wins than Dempster and what have you. But I just think the guy that he was, the way that he played, the way he represented, and the fact that he's got rings with 2 major league organizations, one as a player, one as an executive, pretty good body of work. Ryan Dempster's in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, isn't he? I would imagine so. I should know that. Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame does one thing that I'm on the fence on. Is they'll put Americans into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, but they're Americans who played for a Canadian-based team. And that, to me, you're either one or you're the other, and they've decided that that's what they're going to do, that they're going to bring in different Hall of Famers, different inductees. Do you think that that's the right election criteria? That so long as you played for a Canadian-based team, and by the way, the Astros have just beaten the Yankees 2-1. That's a final. Keuchel with the win. He improves to 2-0. Tanaka takes his first loss of the postseason. He's 1-1. Gillies with a save. His second. Astros lead that best-of-7 series 1-0. I'm sorry, Reneel. But this year's inductees, Roy Halladay, Vladdy Guerrero, and Ray Carter, president of Baseball Canada. Previous inductees, Denny Martinez, Pat Henkin, Carlos Delgado, Felipe Alou. Again, not everybody of Canadian descent, but yet they find their way into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The reason I struggle with it, and I shouldn't, I totally understand. They're trying to build the walls. They're trying to pay tribute to those who have done good for the game of baseball. Is if you're going to be the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, then be the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. I understand what they're trying to achieve, and I understand the mission, the vision, the values, the history. I get it all. But my one fear is, for example, in Cooperstown, it's called the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And I think when you leave it a little bit gray, then you have a chance to fit everybody in. But the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, maybe they did it this way because at the time there weren't enough people to put into the Hall of Fame. I could be dead wrong, but when I look at names and I see Tony Fernandez and Ernie Witt and Roberto Alomar, Alomar might be the perfect example. Tommy Lasorda is in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. Joe Carter, Andre Dawson, Steve Rogers, Gary Carter. You go long ways back. And again, all of those players that I just mentioned have a tie to a Canadian baseball team, be it the Expos or be it the Blue Jays. But when you only induct 4 to 6 people per year, very hard to say. I understand it. But when I walk the halls of the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, I want to see Canadians. I want to see Canadian content. I don't know. I think I could be talked off this ledge. But for my money, like I said, the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame is an interesting one for me because I can go 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and I can understand both sides of the argument. But for me, for my money, when I see names like Roy Halladay going in, cool. Roy Halladay goes in, but what Canadian did they pass up on to allow that spot for Roy Halladay? Would love to hear from you, man. 604-280-1040. 604-280-1040. We get into the baseball offseason now, and of course, we're still watching 4 teams, but there are other teams that are already well at work trying to get ready for the next season. And I can sit here and talk about the Cubs and the Dodgers. I could talk about the Astros and the Yankees, but, I think we've waxed poetically on that. There are other teams that realize that they're pretty doggone close. Minnesota surprised a lot of people. I did not see Minnesota in the rearview mirror, and all of a sudden they zip past the likes of Kansas City, the White Sox, the Blue Jays, the Seattle Mariners, the Angels, and what have you. But the Angels have an interesting scenario coming up as well. They've got some big names that are starting to get a little long in the tooth. They've got some pitching questions, and they're a team that did not challenge Houston. They finished 80-82. By the way, Houston had 101 wins. They were 40 games above 500. Nobody else in their division even got to 500 that season. I would assume if you're the Angels, you're looking for a little bit of offense. They've got holes all over the place. I mean, they've got what some would say is the best player in baseball in Mike Trout, but they don't have a second baseman. They don't have a third baseman. They don't have a left fielder. They're starting pitching as suspect. And you know what? Now, just now, they're starting to see a little bit of money coming off the books, as in Josh Hamilton. But the Blue Jays should take a look, because when they look at free agency, there's going to be a lot of teams this year, particularly in the American League, that are looking to bolster their lineups as well, that are looking to get there to the next level as well. And if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, to kind of localize the story, and I think you could even throw the Mariners into the mix if you really wanted to make it geographically relevant, you're looking at a market this year that doesn't have a lot of studs in it, but have a lot of teams that are really hungry to either recapture that playoff magic quickly, like the Blue Jays, who do still have a good team, or a team like the Angels who have underachieved. Which means you're going to drive that price through the ceiling. And that, for me, is probably the biggest fear for the Toronto Blue Jays, is overpaying for a guy that is a mediocre player at best. And I have said for a long time now that the cavalry is coming for the Toronto Blue Jays, that they will have talent coming from the minor leagues. But it's still 2 years away, minimum. I was talking with John Schneider, a former manager of the Vancouver Canadians, the other day, and they loved Nate Pearson down at extended spring training this year. Guy's a star, but he's still a couple of years away. TJ Zoik, a guy that was a right-hander for us the year before in 2016. He's a star, but he's still 2 years away. So you've got all these blue chip prospects that are now somewhere between long A and double A, but you don't have anybody that's ready to jump in right now. And we always say that baseball is about timing. And right now, with the Red Sox all of a sudden going into a, uncertain offseason, the Yankees are still in a rebuild, despite the fact that they were playing a game tonight in the American League Championship Series. Tampa Bay. Baltimore's getting old. They're a little long in the tooth. The Blue Jays, with the right offseason acquisitions, could very much get right back into the conversation. I mean, they really could. I mean, I don't think they'll get snake bitten again the way that they did this year. Everybody's so ready to disassemble the Toronto Blue Jays. Injuries suck, man. And the Blue Jays took it on the chin. Actually, I think if I read that properly, they were within the top 5 this year in Major League Baseball teams with man games lost. But I tell you, and I say this with a lot of sincerity, that is still a ship that you can turn back into the wind in a hurry and get your team right back to the front of the pack. I believe that is thick as my skin. As thick as my fin. But I don't know. Are they willing to overpay for a mid-range player? There's a lot of baseball free agents that are going to be available this year, and you know what? None of them really jump off the page. Like, nobody really stands out to me. I mean, if I was to look at the class right now, starting pitching, well, Jake Arrieta, Rich Hill, Yu Darvish. Again, it's the same suspects. Johnny Cueto, who seems to be always available. You got Masahiro Tanaka. There's nobody at catching. There's nobody really at first base. Eric Hosmer, if you're really looking, but I have a feeling he'll get picked up. Here's a good one. Unless the Astros make some terrible clerical error and don't pick up Jose Altuve's $6 million option. Can you imagine the Astros made that kind of mistake? I think he'll be just fine. Todd Frazier is the big name at the hot corner right now. The outfield has people like JD Martinez, Lorenzo Cain, and in the relief ranks, there's not money there as well. So you're talking about those kind of players that are going to get huge offers from about 4 or 5 teams that legitimately feel like they are a player or two away from being right where the Astros and the Yankees and the Cubs and the Dodgers are. And I don't know if the Blue Jays really want to get into that kind of a shouting match from a free agent perspective against those teams. Am I wrong? I think right now the Blue Jays aren't that bad. You lock up Donaldson at third. You've still got a little bit of Tulowitzki at short. Your right side of the infield, I mean, I don't think Justice Smoke will ever duplicate what he did this year. I do think that's a little lightning in the bottle, and that's with all due respect to Justice Smoke. Second base has always been kind of a, what are we going to do here? You've got Russell Martin for a couple of more years behind the plate. Jose Bautista's money frees up. You've got Kevin Pillar in center. So really, if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, you're looking for one more starter. You're probably looking for maybe a second baseman. And then, of course, you've got your corner outfielders. Well, those are going to cost you some money. If you want to go out right now and not take a chance on, Dalton Pompey or Ramon Fields or any of the players in the system that are coming up, right now, JD Martinez, formerly of the Tigers, he'll get a lot of money. I mean, Carlos Gonzalez is an interesting one, but a lot of people will always say, well, he played in Colorado. Therefore, do those numbers translate to a different ballpark? Curtis Granderson at 37? That's not a move. I don't think you go back to the well with Colby Rasmus as well. So, I don't know, man. I hope to God that the Blue Jays don't spend poorly, and if they rely on their system, realize that they're going to have to dance with the girl that brought them to the prom next year in 2018. But if this team that took to the field this year is back in 2018, is that enough to get them back into the postseason? I don't think so. I think if I can give you my real quick assessment before we take our final break here, you go out and you get yourself your pitcher. You go out and you get yourself one more guy, because I can tell you this, a rotation that has Sanchez, that has Stroman, that has Estrada, that has Happ, and then has the, quote, proverbial player to be named later. I think you're one pitcher away from having 5 pretty good arms. Now, the Blue Jays at the Vancouver Canadians level went to a 6-man rotation. Dare they go into that situation and maybe let Joe Biagini again be a starter? I don't know analytically what that looks like, but to me, a 6-man rotation is really something. I don't know if players like 6-man rotations either. I don't even know if players like 5-man rotations. And the reason being is the more your rotation evolves and develops and grows, the less chance you have A, to pitch, B, to put up numbers, and numbers are what gets you your contract. Pitch 200 innings, make the Quan. Win 20 games, make the Quan. But if you are... And by the way, Quan is a Rod Tidwell, Jerry Maguire reference. But if you don't get to those numbers, you don't get paid. And sure, you might be fresher because you're pitching now once every 6 days instead of once every 5. But I just think that, statistically, competitively, I mean, you pitch on a Monday, you don't pitch again until Sunday. I don't know. It's not for me, man. That's just me. All right, final break. When we come back, we will wrap this show up with a big old bow. We'll get you ready for Vancouver Giants this week. Do not forget, 10 p.m. tonight, we talk everything as we bring you into the Rob Fay Nation. We'll do that starting at 10, but on the other side of the break, the nice bow, the nice packaging as we wrap up this show right here on TSN 1040. Final segment of Vancouver Canadians Game Day powered by Booster Juice. I'm Rob Fay. Thank you for making time for me this evening. How about Major League Baseball replay? That is right now back in the spotlight because of what happened with the Washington Nationals. There are some that say it screwed the Washington Nationals, and they wouldn't be wrong. A great number of things, according to Yahoo Sports, went wrong for the Washington Nationals last night. Another exit from the postseason. There was Max Scherzer just blowing up. Jason Worth sliding right past the line drive in left field. 13 runners left on base. But then there was the Jose Lobaton in his 8th inning rally killing pickoff at first base. They say that it effectively ended the Nats' late inning threat and handed the momentum right back to the Chicago Cubs. And you know what? The replay stopped everything for the Nationals in their tracks. Now that, of course, according to YahooSports.com, they're entitled to their opinion, and it's an opinion that I agree with. When you look at the replay, yeah, it was the wrong play. And it will bring up the big debate, and I hate when that happens because you know what? We have lived and died with the replay now for a couple of years. And you know what? You've either got to live with its imperfections Or you've got to, say, hey, man, we're going to stick with the umpires, who then will get scrutinized 10 ways to tomorrow. See, the beauty of the instant replay from where I stand is in the sense that it takes pressure off the umpire. Yes, the umpire's got to be right there. He's got to make the call. He doesn't want to get challenged. But you know what? At least the call at the end of the day gets right 99% of the times. But even the ruling is that you have to have significant enough evidence to turn a call. So if an umpire says out, there has to be definitive evidence, and we all know this, that it has to be wronged to make it a right. And in baseball, just like football and now hockey, you can pretty much do 3D or 360 perspectives on every inch of the field or the rink. The problem is when you get to the postseason, I don't know, man. I think that you've got to be able to make these plays right. These type of plays are actually a little more common than you would think. Fielders know that base runners who slide or dive into a bag are left in some awkward positions. So if they move just a little bit or can't hold their foot on the hand on the right place, bingo, they're done. Now that is, of course, some would say kind of Mickey Mouse baseball, but it is still baseball. And that's essentially what the problem is. Major League Baseball isn't strict enough on all of their rules. Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. For example, a lot of the leagues will look the other way when it comes to doctoring things or, taking advantage of foreign substances. Of course, if you go over, then they'll get you. But if a throw beats a runner to the bag and the tag is applied and the replay shows it, cool. The system has, essentially done its job. But to hold that tag for a few extra seconds, hoping that your opponent makes the mistake because you know it's going to be recorded, that's a part of the reason that the screwing is being felt today. I don't know, man. It's kind of like the hidden ball trick for me. It's not something that you would expect, but when it happens, it happens. And in this day and age, in 2017, knowing that every 10th of a second is recorded by about 8 different cameras, you can no longer make those mistakes. You can't get up without taking your hand off the bag or the foot off the bag because that guy's going to hold it. They know now that if they hold it, chances are there's going to be that 1/10 of a second, and that's when you can challenge that play, and that's when that play gets changed and you're left on the outside looking in. Do I like it? I don't. But I understand it's now a part of the game. And as a player, knowing that that's a part of the game, I've got to make the adjustment. You can't keep yelling at the system that you wanted to put in place. I mean, everybody said, we should have replay in baseball. I mean, look at how many calls are getting screwed up here. Then all of a sudden, you get the replay, and now people complain because, now look at this. The guy takes his hand off the bag for 1/10 of a second, and all of a sudden, now he's out, and it changes the entire course of a game. But you wanted that. And in 2017, they're not using the cameras from the 1920s and 30s. Hey, everybody, gather around. They're using high 4K cameras that get every inch in high definition, and they see it all. And so if they go to a replay and they suddenly realize that, there it is, there is a fraction of a sunbeam that has gotten between the base of that hand, he's out. So the reality comes back to, what do you want from baseball? Do you want the beauty of the human element when it comes to the officiating, or do you want them to be as technical as possible? Because from a technical standpoint, the Nationals didn't get screwed. But from a baseball standpoint, they did get screwed. But you can't have both sides of that cake. You've got to be able to say, you know what, I'm willing to change my game because this is the way that the game is played in 2017. Or you've got to say, you know what, screw it. We're going to allow that gray area because we'd rather have the human element of the game. You can't have both. By the way, I don't know if you heard this. This is not a sports story. Clemson loses their quarterback, and then they lose to Syracuse tonight, 27-24. Clemson is the number 2 ranked team in the NCAA. Their BCS just take a major punch in the face. As we wrap up this show, of course, tonight, the winner, Houston. They get past the Yankees with a Game 1 win. Dallas Keuchel was the story. Boy, he was good in the opener. They'll see him probably again in Game 4 or Game 5, depending on where they are in that series. Keuchel strikes out 10. He allows just 4 hits over 7 scoreless innings. And even though the Birdman gave the Yankees a lone run in the 9th on a solo home run, the Astros hold serve at home, and now we'll look for a 2-0 series lead. Did you hear the Cubs? Their flight to L.A. was diverted to Albuquerque today because of a medical issue on a plane. I've been on a plane where somebody has had a heart attack, and I'll never forget it. It was coming back from Toronto, and we ended up having to divert, and if memory serves me, we corrected to Calgary. But we dropped like in a hurry. We were at like 40,000 feet, and in the blink of an eye, we were at 30. In the blink of an eye, we were at 25. We were at 15. We were at 5, and we were on the ground. And the people rushed onto the plane. They carried that person off, and that person later died. We heard the next morning they passed away. Well, the Cubs were supposed to get into L.A. early this morning, catch a little bit of sleep, have a workout, do their media stuff, and do all of that at Dodger Stadium. That schedule well off, and Game 1 of the NLCS is tomorrow evening. So I would assume by tomorrow morning they'll get back on schedule. But, of course, it was a family member of one of the players, and they haven't reported who it is. Maybe they have it, I don't know. But the plane was still on the ground in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, not long ago. So, yeah, there are definitely some challenges with the Cubs as they make their way towards Los Angeles. Will it be a factor? Will the team be shaken by the player who had his family member struggle on the plane with a medical issue? I don't know. There's so many layers to baseball. Blows my mind. All right, we're going to get ready to go. We will make way for the G-Men. The Giants and Vancouver Giants this week. Of course, they're in action this weekend. Brooke Ward, the affable Brooke Ward, will take you on the other side of the break. I'm Rob Fay, and this has been Vancouver Canadians Game Day. My thanks to KP Wee, my thanks to Izzy Fear, and my thanks for you for checking in tonight. I'll see you myself at 10 o'clock for Rob Fay Nation Radio, but on the other side of the break, we talk Giants right here on TSN Radio.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.